Hey everyone, welcome back to the Scaling Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Harper. My guest today is Dan Clapp, CEO of Voda Cleaning and Restoration and founder of Franchise Playbook. Dan is someone I respect tremendously in the franchise industry, and he's a very good friend of mine. He's been building his business, I've been building mine, and we've been building alongside one another for years.
Flew to another franchisor conference. I find conferences are a great place to, kind of reset. I heard a franchisor up on stage speaking, and he had talked about how before building this massive franchise entity, he was close to failing at it. And he had said to his wife, honey, the difference between us being broke and super broke is pretty much the same. We might as well go all in. And at this time, when I'm listening to him speak, I'm there alone. I'm losing about 70 grand a month in payroll. We're not having anyone interested in our franchise. And it hit me right in the chest what he said. Flew home. Said to the team, maybe we're not all in. Let's burn the boats. We went even more in, whether it's capital, other resources, etc. A little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, but July 2nd, we end up awarding our first, then an 8th, then the 20th, and now we're at 90 franchise owners and about 220 territories.
Dan and I go way back. We both launched brands from one single location from scratch to turn it into a national franchise, with him having over 250 units, me having over 300 units, and us doing it at about the same time. In this episode, we unpacked what that journey has looked like for him, from buying and selling franchises and running a lead generation company to building now one of the fastest growing restoration franchises out there. If you're thinking about starting a franchise or building one or buying a business from scratch, do not miss out on this conversation. Dan Claps, welcome to the show, my man.
Aaron, good to see you. Good to talk with you.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is so I've been on a handful of episodes of your podcast before, so this is cool. Coming full circle and you being on here. So what I thought we could get into today is you and I, we've developed this great friendship. We've both launched brands from scratch. People probably have they want to know how that's going or what we've learned. But yeah, so for the listeners who don't know you, let's start with your background in franchising, the businesses you've launched, and catch me up to speed on Voda, and then we'll just talk.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. Excited to be a guest, and perhaps we can take some of this and put it on my podcast too, so we can get double the listeners. But I assume we have some of the common listeners, since we've been doing this journey really parallel to each other, step by step. Quick background, thanks again for having me. Anyone that's listening that doesn't know me, I'm Dan Clapp, CEO of Voda Cleaning and Restoration. Been in the franchise space for 11 years. Got started pretty early in my career. I was I stumbled on franchising in 2014 after doing some other businesses, and was in my early 20s. My dad said, why don't you look at franchises? They're all about home, systems and processes. And for me at that time, really needed that education on how to build systems. And so found franchising, started looking at buying a franchise in 2014 in the home services space. Didn't really have the capital at that time to do something at that caliber. And so I found franchising on lower investments. I started with a franchise called Murphy Business and Financial. They're a business brokerage franchise that had been around since the 80s with 300 locations, and joined them originally as an agent. Got to get my first, kind of step in doing that. And if you don't know what a business broker is, it's someone that helps people sell or buy businesses, like a realtor, but for businesses. And so my early 20s, I'm selling car washes and gyms and fitness studios and all these kinds of different businesses. And somewhere along the line started really doing a lot of franchise resales. And so that local franchise owner that bought a business, built it up, and wanted to sell it, I was helping broker those transactions. And pretty quickly saw how an owner would buy a franchise for, several $100,000, build it up, and then sell it for a multiple of the cash flows, which was great for many buyers. But I thought, wow, that's a great return for the original franchise owner, right? They got in low, they built it up, and they sold it. And so really identified franchise new territories as something I loved. And so in lieu of my business brokerage business, I was also helping people buy new franchises. So imagine, Aaron, you were looking at a a gym resale, you fell in love with the business, you fell in love with the franchise system, but the landlord stopped the deal, let's say. But you still loved the business. I would say, well, what if we look at new territory? And so all of a sudden I became this kind of resale, franchise resale and new territory expert. In 2016, realized that I really enjoyed the lead generation component of what I was doing more than the actual brokering and consulting, and had the opportunity to partner with my previous business partner to start a lead generation company in the franchise space. And so I always tell people I love franchising because you're plugging into a wheel, they're plugging into a system. In my case, I started with franchising where I learned a lot, and then I started a business with a previous partner that had a lot of the frameworks and kind of industry knowledge. And so I always tell people, usually you're successful not alone, you're successful because of either people or systems. And so I was able to learn a ton from that. Built that business from 2016 to 2022. And then that company was acquired by private equity in May of 2022, which gave me the capital to go out and do what I'm doing here with Voda today.
Cool. So what made you decide that you wanted to become a franchisor?
In my lead generation business, I had been helping lots and lots of people directly and indirectly buy a franchise. I saw many of them buying a franchise, but I didn't like the fact that after they bought, I had no control. A lot of times people would say, Dan, I loved working with you. How do I keep working with you? And once they bought the franchise, that was it. And so I really wanted to, be involved with people for a longer time horizon after they bought a franchise. I do believe I was put on earth to help people become a business owner. It's all I've really done now for the past 11 years is study and learn helping people become a business owner. And so it just felt like the natural progression. I didn't like the way some franchisors were doing things after the fact, after someone would buy the franchise. And I hated the lack of control that I had. And then also, funny story is when I was in the lead generation business, all throughout my 20s, I would go to conferences where franchisors, founders and CEOs would congregate. They would go for themselves to learn how to be a better franchisor, what to do well, what not to do. And when I say these conferences, they're not just sessions and panels and PowerPoint presentations. It's at the breakfast and at the happy hours, and every minute of the time, you're soaking in information about being a franchisor. My way of selling leads back then was to go to those conferences, and I would be the vendor at the happy hours, connecting with franchisors. But what I learned was during the day, they had these education sessions for the franchisors. A lot of the other vendors would go out and do calls or maybe go out to the beach or whatever they would do during the day. I'm sure a lot of them did what I was doing too, but some of them wouldn't. And I was like, you know what, I'm here anyway. I might as well go in these sessions, learn about being a franchisor. I wish I could tell you I had the foresight that I would teach myself franchising all that time to then be a franchisor. That wasn't the case. I just had found that when I was in those sessions during the coffee break or sitting next to someone was a way to generate more business for me. But in retrospect, it was really a MBA in franchising because for 7 or 8 years, whatever it was, I sat through all of these sessions learning to be a franchisor. And so that really was a natural progression for me. And then finally, it gave me a lot of relationships. And so I knew all the kind of puzzle pieces from that experience, which allowed me to become a franchisor.
Okay, so you sell your business to private equity, which many people here would absolutely love to do. So before we talk about Voda, what was that experience like? What were some things you learned? I guess how big was the business was rolled into another business, but whatever you're comfortable sharing about the size of the business, I want to double click on that kind of transaction process.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing I would tell you is, we always built the business with the concept of build to scale or build to sell. I love the book Build to Sell. I'm a big believer in build it to sell it, but don't sell it. And so, for most of those years, we were building the business, trying to put processes in place, really focusing on making a sellable business. But somewhere along the lines, it was my first business or main real bigger business. It was also there to make me a living, and which was great. And there's nothing wrong with that. I definitely learned through that experience the value of a longer time horizon and what you can build in 10 years, 20 years, if you're not focused on extrapolating all the profits out, as fast as possible. And so that business taught me how to make money, how to build a business that was profitable, and how to build a business that you could sell. But I think the biggest thing was, in hindsight, at the time, some of the advice you would get didn't, I wasn't thinking as far out, perhaps because I needed to make money then. After exiting that business, the biggest lessons I learned were three things. Number one, well, the first thing I learned was my business, whatever business I'm in, is my net worth, not my self-worth. I had attached a tremendous amount of my identity to that business, and so selling it was very difficult for me. Partly I felt like I wasn't done with what I was doing, but the factors involved that I wasn't really in control of selling or not. I'm glad we did, but at that time, my identity was so attached to it, and in retrospect, that was kind of silly. The second thing I learned is the power of decentralized command. And so where I was a jack of all trades, master of none, I was responsible for operations, legal, finance, sales, admin. And I had people working with me that were good at it, but I was probably the best at all of those things. And that's not to say much. I'm not that great at any of them. And so decentralizing command, what I saw the PE firm do right away is bring in smart people for each area of the business. And then I would say the third really kind of stems from that, which was learning how to be more open to listening to people more experienced than me. Looking back, I do feel a lot of the advice I had gotten, if I had applied it, we would have gone even further. With that said, that's the humble side. The less humble side is, realizing that I very much like having full control over the aggressiveness of how fast or how far, more importantly, how far I want to take a business. I think that it taught me that the less you think about making money now and the more you think about a long time horizon, the more that you're going to see benefit. And so with Voda, there was very much an intentionality, as I know you had, around building a strong core foundation, not building the business on, quicksand, instead building it on a tremendous foundation. Because if you get that right, you can keep growing. Whereas if you skip those steps, you might grow to one point, but it'll come back to haunt you later.
So you sell your business. It's May of 2022. Now what? Did you immediately know you wanted to roll that capital into another business? Like, where's your thought process at, and how do you find Voda?
Well, I remember my dad saying, "What are you going to do with the money?" And I remember saying, "This isn't money, this is capital. It doesn't exist." And so I transferred the vast majority of that money from one account into a new business operating account. That was number one. So I knew I was going to do something else. I do remember at the time going to dinner with my best friend saying, what am I going to do? What if it was just luck? What if it was timing? What if it was my partner? What if I can't build a business as big as that one again? And I was very right at that dinner that I couldn't build a business as big as that one again. Not because it was too big, but it was actually too small compared to where I could go. And so, like any of your listeners that are thinking about getting into business or already in business, I had the same self-doubt that everyone has, even with a win behind my belt or under my belt. And so I took that capital, started looking at opportunities, was originally going to do a completely different type of transaction, but actually met you at Springboard and kind of realized there was a different way to go about it. And then all I can tell you is at one point I just bet on myself. And the second mentally that changed, the doors started to open. For example, meeting our COO and co-founder, Zach Nolte, could never do the business without him. Our CMO, Christian, the founder, Dragon, Steve, our VP of development. And so tying that all together, it was the lessons of learning about finding smarter people, better at things that I wasn't good at, bringing them in. I know that's a cliche people say, but there's so much value to that. And I think having that experience from the previous business allowed me to think that way.
And so for the listeners that don't know, the deal structure, which I've written a lot about, that Dan and both both I did with Rolling Suds is kind of franchise through acquisition. So we found a great business that was building and going really well. Then we said to that business owner, hey, you have this great business. We want you to keep running your great business. In fact, like, we love your business so much that we're going to build a different business that is going to then create opportunities for other people that want to become franchisees. We're going to raise all the capital. We're going to build the team. We're going to do everything for this new business. You're going to get equity in this new business that you didn't have before, and you get to keep 100% of your business. And I'll never forget when you and I met or we had met before, but we really kind of for the first time talked at Springboard, a conference for emerging franchisors in September of 2022. And I was like, you were like, hey, like, I was like, what are you going to do now? I asked you the same question. What are you going to do now? And you're like, well, I think I'm going to go buy a restoration company. And I'm like, well, why are you going to buy a restoration company? You want to go run a restoration company? And you're like, no, I want to be a franchisor. And I was like, well, this is exactly what I'm doing. Do this if you want to, that's the best way to do it. Because starting a franchise is incredibly capital intensive. Like it costs a lot of money to build a franchisor with a good foundation with the people that you're mentioning and the intellectual capital associated with that. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure that the listeners know that's kind of like how we've structured it. So from that point in September of 2022, you looked at a bunch of different businesses. I'm not sure. I looked at about 24, but kind of walk me through the process of finding Voda and then like closing the deal.
Yeah, well, it started with, and just to add to that sort of crazy thing, is that I was at that conference and I was actually hiding out in my hotel room for a good portion of the conference. I felt a little awkward coming to the conference with that huge goal. If you can imagine, when you want to be a franchisor, it sounds like you want to start the next Facebook. It's like a huge undertaking, and I was reluctant. And so I finally made my way down to the conference, and I only talked to really only you and one other person. And ironically, Zach had talked to you, and he had only talked to you about it. And, the doors opened, when I had said I was looking for a great, partner. I think what happened was, Zach and I just really focused on building a team before finding a brand. There's a power to building a business with a bunch of people that believe in something from the ground up. You can never take it away. Comp doesn't change that. It's about being involved in something that's an idea turning to reality. Obviously, you can bring on amazing people further into the dream, but when you start something together, there's definitely power. And so, we brought on our CMO, Christian Betancourt, and we had Steve already on the team, and really just focused on building and maintaining this cohesive leadership team. We knew we wanted to be in restoration. And, the door opened that I got introduced to Dragan, this incredible founder who moved here from Serbia in 2004, didn't speak any English, was a lifeguard, then a security guard in a nightclub. Was working there, met his now wife at the nightclub. They ended up getting married, and he quickly said, this is not where I want to work when I raise a family. So he put in his notice. There was another gentleman always in the nightclub, seemed to clearly be making a lot of money, was always there, had the money to be there, and basically said, I'm leaving here in 2 weeks. What do you do? It seems like you make great money. And the gentleman said, I'm in the carpet cleaning business. And so Dragan started working, with him. And after a short period of time, that individual needed to go back overseas and said, you run the business, we'll split the profits. And so Dragan was able to learn the business and kind of work kind of like a franchise, right? Got to learn from someone. That partnership ended up eventually ending, and he went on his own to start the original business in 2009. From cleaning carpets himself all the way 15 years later to this massive business that he had built with his wife. And I was just fascinated by it. I was equated to the movie The Founder with Michael Keaton, where he plays, Ray Kroc. I was that guy. We went to dinner. We hit it off right away. We shared core values. And, the next morning I was like, we got to franchise this. Now, Dragan had that vision of franchising. And so we just, we really aligned there. And so just another example of just people, right? Right person, right founder, right leadership team. Acquired the business in February 2023 as far as the franchise entity. rebranded in March of 2023 to Voda, which means water in Serbian, which is really cool, pays homage to the Serbian roots. And then Dragon, myself, Zach, Christian, and Steve went to market in April of 2023.
So April of 2023, you decide you're going to sell franchises. You join different broker networks. And what happens?
Well, as you know, 3% of franchisors ever get to 100 territories. It takes them 100 years to do it. The business model...
100 years. It does.
Yeah.
It does take them 100 years.
100 years, 10 years. Feels like 100.
Every year in franchising feels like 10. So, yeah, I think 10 years, 10 feels like 10 is 100 years. Yeah,
I didn't have these lines here pre-Voda, but
yeah. I have the same ones.
Yeah, you didn't have those. I remember. But you know, they're sobering statistics of the success rate of being a franchisor, and I had put most of my capital into the business, ignoring those stats. They do say the courage and stupidity are pretty similar. I guess I was too dumb to fail in the sense that I wasn't afraid of those stats. Put the money in, thought we'll be the next big thing. We're going to be the next Serve Pro. And it couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. April, we launch. No one buys our franchise. No one's even interested. May, no one's interested. June, no one's interested or really like tracking. Flew to another franchisor conference. I find conferences are a great place to, kind of reset. I heard a franchisor up on stage speaking, and he had talked about how before building this massive franchise entity, he was close to failing at it. And he had said to his wife, honey, the difference between us being broke and super broke is pretty much the same. We might as well go all in. And at this time, when I'm listening to him speak, I'm there alone. I'm losing about $70,000 a month in payroll. We're not having anyone interested in our franchise. And it hit me right in the chest what he said. Flew home, said to the team, maybe we're not all in. Let's burn the boats. We went even more in, whether it's capital, other resources, etc. A little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, but July 2nd, we end up awarding our first, then an 8th, then the 20th, and now we're at 90 franchise owners and about 220 territories.
It's amazing. It's just amazing growth. So one of the things that I was really impressed about, and I still continue to be, is by you specifically, is the franchise kind of broker / franchise sales community. It's hard for an emerging brand to kind of break in and really stand out in that community. Now, you were on the other side of that, right? You were on the lead generation side. You've also been a business broker. But what I really liked is you led your team into really penetrating a lot of those broker networks and becoming really relevant. Like you put a lot of time. You've been on a lot of flights. Could you talk a little bit about that? Kind of like what your strategy has been, and if someone's listening to this and wants to franchise their business, what they should do?
Yeah. Well, the first thing was, first thing I recommend is, having someone who's done it, like a mentor, someone who's doing it, like yourself and I, having that relationship, when you're stressed, having someone you can call as an outlet. Because trust me, your family and friends start to get sick of it really quickly. So you need to have someone that's in it with you and your team. And then ideally, if you can reach back, which I guess this would be an example of giving back to people that are trying to do something. The first thing was we had pretty good bones of operational capacity when we launched. But what we started to do is we started to actually listen to candidates that did not buy and ask them what we were missing, and then not being defensive or making excuses, we would actually try to build the things that we found that the prospective customer, the prospective franchisee, wanted. So first thing was building what we saw candidates wanted. The second thing was then crystallizing what we were doing and communicating that in the development process. And so I believe any franchise, there's 5 things that every prospective franchise owner or regular business owner thinks about. And if you're listening to this, you're probably going to say, well, yeah, those start to make sense. And I could tell you a story of how it checks the boxes. But Number one is leads. How are you going to get customers? And how is the franchisor going to support you in doing so? You don't have a business without customers. Two is once you have some customers, how are you going to service those customers? So how are you going to get teammates, employees to service those customers? And how is the franchisor going to support you? Three is there's already chances are power washing or restoration or painting or gym in your market. So what's the unique selling proposition, the USP that's going to stand out to the customer, that the end user? Four is the numbers. No one's doing these businesses because they woke up wanting to power wash houses or extract water from basements. They wanted to make money. So how do the unit economics work? And then five, one of the most important is the day in the life. What is the owner's day in the life as a franchisee? And so first we built those things, and then we communicated them in a clear, concise way, knowing that you're going to have these thoughts, and you're actually going to have them in somewhat similar to the order I just told you. And so structuring our development process to ensure that we were covering it on a broad sense in the beginning of the process, but then covering each area as someone gets further along, because these thoughts and questions pop up more and more at certain stages in the buying process. So it was really identifying what the customers wanted, building those systems, and then communicating that we had those systems at the right place and right time.
And then also communicating those things specifically to broker networks, right? Like you guys do, what percentage of your deals approximately are done with brokers?
It's about 70%, 70 to 80%, depending on the month.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to a bunch of different conferences, you're hopping on planes. You were similar to me doing development, doing franchise sales at the beginning. Why did you do that? Like, why were you doing, like, what's your thought process around doing the franchise sales at the beginning and then kind of establishing those relationships with franchise consultants, franchise brokers?
I'm a big believer in, leading from the front and being in the role. There's no job that's above me. Don't let this swanky turtleneck and suit jacket fool you. I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty figuratively. I'm not the most handy guy, so maybe not in that sense, but I didn't want to ask my team to do anything that I wasn't willing to do. And I believe that being a franchisor, just like I tell our franchise partners, they need to be the mayor of the town in their community. I believe on the national level, it's the same thing. Not to be a keyboard warrior. You can't hide behind the keyboard. You got to get out there. And so first thing is I learned from my MBA in franchising, which was the show Undercover Boss, which if you watch is a lot about franchising. Everything I heard from that show, every time, the same pattern was franchisors not coming out to see me. And that applies to franchise owners and it applies to franchise consultants. And I've found that, there's nothing that beats taking the time, the investment of money and time and energy to go and be there with people in person. And so, yes, I was on an airplane and still I'm on an airplane almost every week. I'm not this week. I feel like I'm on vacation, just being in my office. But being out there is key, especially in the beginning. What I've also found is, as a CEO of a franchise brand, it's easy for people to not realize what you're doing, how much you're working. And I find that when people see that you're coming out to them and you're spending time and energy with consultants, for example, it's because you value the relationship and you value attracting great franchise owners. And in the beginning, when I was doing development, it's the same playbook I tell franchise owners, which is you need to do the most revenue generating activities in the beginning. So while now I'm not involved in franchise development anymore because I need to focus on other priorities, in the beginning that was the priority, getting traction, getting momentum. Because if you're a franchise owner and you're part of a system and your franchise not growing, that's not a good thing. You want it to be growing, obviously at a controlled, responsible pace. But it was important to me that first franchise owner that invested under the premise that we were going to have more franchise owners, that we delivered on that promise. And so I just found that being out there was the hardest but best use of my time.
That's great. You're also really involved in the franchise industry as a whole. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about why that's important to you. I know you mentioned giving back, but you've been with me at the IFA events, fly-ins, different things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think we share this kind of thought process. I try to kind of split my time in four buckets. So operations of Voda obviously is key bucket. There's a bucket of franchise development. There's a bucket of understanding franchising, and then there's obviously the restoration home services, bucket. And somewhere in there is kind of understanding from an investment lens and how to build enterprise value, because that is obviously important to any business. I found that franchising kind of solves all of those or helps with all of those buckets, industry specific events. A lot of times people will ask me, like, why do you go to these conferences? What are you doing? I think not smart people don't learn from their mistakes. Smart people learn from their mistakes. Really smart people learn from other people's mistakes. And so, as getting exposed to experiences that, you can hear a franchisor say, hey, don't make this mistake. It really cost our franchisees, scaling or whatever. Being able to learn that and soak all that up only comes from being involved in the industry that you're a part of.
Yep. Okay. So, yeah, I get that question too. Like, what are you doing at these conferences? Where are you? Like, are you there representing, like, trying to sell franchises? And I think the only conferences that I go to that are related to, quote unquote, selling franchises is working with brokers at broker conferences, just to make sure they understand who we're looking for and that, like you said, they value the relationship. But the franchise conferences are really to go and network within the industry and continue to learn and engage with other people in the space, and really be kind of a thought leader. I personally go because I feel like, and you and I have talked about this, there's like a changing of the guard happening in the franchise industry. Some people say franchising is not an industry. I would argue that it is, even though it's a mechanism for building a business as well. But there's certainly an industry of industry professionals who help make this industry go round, and they might jump from franchisor to franchise developer to broker to franchise supplier, and there's an ecosystem for sure. But it's important for me to be there because I do believe there's a changing of the guard. I don't know if I've shared this with you or not, but like David Barr and Brad Fishman, like when they invested in Rolling Suds, it's not a life-changing amount of equity for them. They're very, very, single-digit minority shareholders, but it was very important for them to help franchising, for them to leave franchising with people in place to continue to help it go into this next generation. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that, but that's been a really big, important thing for me as to why I continue to go to and be so engaged in these conferences.
Yeah, I mean, listen, franchising has been my life. So obviously, seeing it thrive is key. I also think that when you attend even franchise consultant events, what people don't realize is you end up spending half the time with other franchisors, which goes back to learning. And I'm not talking about, yes, of course we talk about how to protect our brand and how to grow it, but it's a lot around, I can't tell you how many times I have had situations where, perhaps I would have not made as good of a decision if I didn't have franchisors that have gone further through their journey give me advice. I'll give you a great example. I wanted to start building national accounts in 2025, regional and national accounts. You'd be blown away by how many franchisors, we're part of the same mastermind group, are willing to share relationships, because we're not competing in the space that, you're in power washing, I'm in restoration, another one is in roofing. We're able to open up doors to national accounts that they had spent years developing and saying, hey, here, let me get you right in. And as you know, business is all about who you know. And so I think that all of it ends up helping you find great opportunities. One more example, you have Madeline Zook. She's amazing. If you weren't involved in the franchise community, you wouldn't have someone like that. And franchising is an industry in the sense that it's a discipline. The learning curve of understanding how to help a franchise owner succeed, They're not an employee. They're not a true business partner. They're not an investor. They're a franchise partner, and it's a whole nother designation, right? And so people that know how to do that are rare. And so the more that you attend and you give back to the franchise community, the more you're able to attract these great people that you're attracting, these great investors that you're attracting. You're able to recruit. And the CEO's job should be, number one, is recruiting great people. And so I think that's another reason people don't see the reality of why you're going to all these conferences.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's so important. And I think you and I, we've really even doubled and tripled down on that through the content creation piece too. And I realized how important that was probably at the end of 2023. I feel like you and I, we've just been like lockstep, figuring things out like within a couple months of each other and like sharing learnings along the way. But at the end of 2023, I was like, wait, I think that if I spend a good amount of time on content, we'll be able to recruit better franchisees, have smaller acquisition costs for franchisees, recruit better team members, recruit better suppliers as we need them. And I don't know about you, but that's been true for me. And I go to these conferences, like when we were at the Sidekick event, and every single one of the sidekicks knew me personally. Like they knew who I was before I had ever met them in person because of the content that I put out every day. And I'd love for you to just kind of touch upon your views on that. And then I might get into some systems and stuff as to how you do that and how you stay consistent.
Yeah. So you're saying that content has allowed you to communicate who you are at scale and build relationships at scale.
Yeah, 100%. Like even more than I thought it would when I first started doing it.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. Again, first and foremost, at this point is attracting great talent to work at Voda. And so I found that in my recruiting pipeline of talent, people are able to identify if they want to work with me and our team because we are putting out what the culture actually is about and what it looks like. So that's number one. In the Fran Dev process, so much so, I feel like if you are looking at buying a Voda or a Rolling Suds, you can learn so much about the business, the good and the bad. You could say, you know what, I really respect this Dan guy, or there's things I don't like. And what I know is if someone buys a Voda, unless they don't have a computer or social media, yeah, chances are they consumed a good amount of the content that we put out. And I don't mean just myself and my team. And so that they can make a more informed decision of what they're buying into. And I think you can only accomplish that so much on 5, 6, 7 phone calls, an FDD, a discovery day. But in this day and age, 80% of the buying decision is made before anyone even picks up the phone. And so what we've seen is people are able to truly understand who we are and then make an informed decision based on that content that's authentic and out there versus, trying to posture being some way that's not really the true you, which I think when people only get to know you on a franchise development call, that's not the full you. Like anyone, I've never met anyone, some of the brightest, smartest, most polished CEOs, they have different personal, I want to know them on a personal level. And so I think content really allows you to communicate who you are. And you're going to have people that love you, you're going to have people that tolerate you, and you're going to have people that hate you. And that's okay because the whole point of it is to attract people that completely align with everything you're about.
Do you have any, why do you think more franchisors don't create content regularly and put that out? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, the first is, I was raised, where, the CEO is, always a certain way and always, a certain way. I believe that when I lead people, one of the best things to do as a leader is to show vulnerability, to show your real self, to admit to not being perfect. And that open heart leadership has always worked really well for me in leading cultures. And so I can't do that the same way with a prospective franchise owner, but I can do it through content for them. I think a lot of people are just nervous that what if, it scares someone away. I'll give you a great example of a story. As you know, I work a lot. People could tell. I'm not a robot, though. I'm a human being.
Right.
And in the winter, I was skiing on a trip with Antonia, my girlfriend, and her friends and family. And one of her friends has a really cute son. He's 4 years old. And it's, post skiing, we're all having some drinks and food. And there's music playing. Everyone's dancing. And he goes up on this kind of like pretend stage. And him and I are pretending to DJ. We're dancing. We're having fun. And this is filmed and ends up on my social media. And I remember thinking, I'm Dan, the CEO of Voda. I have to always be up to – that's just not reality, right?
Yeah.
And so I shared that. I was actually a little bit nervous. The same thought people have about even posting more, business content. And I actually found that candidates reached out saying, oh, I didn't know you skied. Who's that kid? He's cute. They realize that I'm a human being, and it humanizes the culture, the leader. And so I think people are just afraid of some type of backfire. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's times that putting out content doesn't help. But what I've learned, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is that the benefits outweigh the negatives so much that it's worth those small negatives that you have to sometimes deal with.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I also, if you build any meaningfully sized audience, like you're just going to have a significant, like the bigger your audience, the larger the percentage of the people are that are going to disagree with the stuff you put out. Twitter is a big part of our business, and the algorithm, like, I don't know if you noticed this, but like completely changed since September of last year. Like, I don't know. It's broken, basically. You're not growing as much. Like you don't have as many. And this one guy, there was one night where this dude just like was like, if you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy a pressure washing franchise, you're an idiot. No one's going to make any money. Pressure washing is the hardest to scale. And of course, he's coming from his own perspective of like, doing residential power washing and making $300, not the commercial side, not the element of everything. But he did this, and all of our franchisees like started posting in his comments being like, no, it's great, like blah, blah, but it was like clearly an attack. And then this other person who runs a pressure washing business screenshotted a picture of me and one of our FAC members and a tweet post that I did in a picture. And he was like, Enron Harper, if your guru looks like that, like just, and it all happened in the same night. And I swear, man, I got like 130 new followers, which was like a big growth jump given where Twitter is at right now. And I wrote underneath his post, I was like, Enron Harper, gotta admit, that's pretty good. And it's just crazy. Like, people are going to not like you just because your stuff that you're doing bothers them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I've never met someone like a hater or someone negative doing better than me. And quite frankly.
Hey, Dan, do you hear that echo? Yeah, go ahead. Well, where you left off was I've never met someone who was doing better than me that was hating me.
And I don't mean better in like I've never met someone more fit, comment on trying to eat healthy, or I've never met someone more successful, make a comment. I find that people usually it goes up. And listen, I'll give you a personal example. I live in New York City, and I've recently been exposed to more people that are doing amazing things. And I could think about this one friend of a friend that just seems like they don't have to work very much. They're traveling all the time. They're, just it seems like things are so easy. And, just got into business, wasn't always in business, and then just succeeded. And I felt myself finding ways to say, well, this or that, these are all ego. These are all things that have to do with, your own deep rooted insecurities or whatever. And as I changed my mindset, I realized that no, actually, there's plenty of other people just doing way better than you. And when I say way better, I mean, they still have a balanced life. They have money, and they're not working every second. They have a marriage that's, we're taught that like people that are really successful, something has to be wrong. And that's not always the case. It might be in the circle that you were in, but as you elevate to other circles, you might find that like, wow, in comparative to this circle, which is good, right? In this room, I'm actually the least successful. And so I think that, if someone, using this as an example, and I don't know the case, but if someone was, built a power washing business since they were in their college years, and then a franchisee comes in and succeeds, like I can understand they feel their ego is bruised. If, for example, whoever you're listening, if you're listening, don't attack me now with your clever name. But in all seriousness, like I get it. It's a feeling of, who is this person that's doing something, different. And so typically when we hate something or we're afraid of something, it's mostly has to do with not understanding it. So I think that you can't let that stuff bother you. You got to just stick true to your North Star. And if you're inspiring 50% of the people and irritating the other 50%, well, you're still inspiring 50%, which is better than inspiring no one by being mediocre and doing nothing. So yeah. I'd rather be amazing to some, hated by some, than mediocre to all.
So let's tactically talk about content a little bit. So we've discussed our systems, and I thought we could leave the listeners with some key takeaways. So what does your current team look like? How many pieces do you put out per week? Like, what are your systems around content creation?
Yeah, so I spend all day recording content. That's all I do. I'm just looking at a camera. That's the other thing about content. People will start to think that's all you do. I spend about 4 hours a month on recording content. We do it in a batch over a few hours once a month. We change shirts, change locations. And then mostly I speak at a lot of different things. And so our content person just comes and records things that we're already doing anyway. Methodically post a reel every day. I post to LinkedIn pretty much every day, 3 tweets a day on Twitter using Tweet Hunter, and I use Taplio, which are tools that allow you to schedule it ahead of time. And Twitter, I get about 2 views, even though I tweet every single day. But what's important is when I post a reel, I get 10 likes. It's not a lot, but it's the people that are watching that are the exact audience that I'm trying to influence that matter. And so, it's learning to not track vanity metrics, instead tracking actual metrics that matter. And so for me, it doesn't matter if one person watches the video. If that's the person I'm specifically trying to target, and they end up either becoming a teammate or a Voda franchise partner or a vendor, then it doesn't matter if 100 people or 2 people watched it. What matters is I'm speaking to my audience. My audience is not the world. I'm not trying to be, Alex Hormozi or, Kylie Jenner. I'm trying to be Dan that runs Voda, and it doesn't matter if 2 people see it or 200 people see it. It matters if it makes an impact on the people that matter to my business. And so I think that's the first thing is just don't try to build. You don't need to do this for some type of metric that doesn't matter.
Yeah. How do you create stuff? How do you come up with the stuff that you want to create?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the reasons I like content is it forces you to come up with more things. And so what it does is I've always been a voracious reader. I love to read. I love to listen to audiobooks. But content's forced me to do it even more because that's what allows me to learn and then teach. And then when I teach, I learn it better. And so I tell you that selfishly, I do content for myself because when I read something in a book and then I go out and try to teach it online, the teaching actually makes me learn it better and vice versa. And so the main way I do content is I just try to keep up with as much reading as I can.
That's cool. Do you have plans to scale the content side up as you scale Voda, or kind of do you have a larger vision for I know, I want to talk about your vision for Voda. But I didn't know if you had thought about that from a content perspective as well.
Yeah, I think things happen in seasons. I try to stay at the bare minimum of what I've been doing. There's times when I have a more free schedule and I may double down on content. There's times like right now where I find myself in a bit more of a operational seat, trying to make some moves that initiatives I want rolled out by our June conference, and so I'm a little bit less content heavy.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I finish certain projects, then I may come back to it. So it really depends. But the goal is just to be disciplined to do kind of the baseline that we've established is what we're going to do, like the one reel a day and the things I said. Um, I think it just depends on the season.
Yep. So vision for Voda. You're at 225 units, 90 franchise owners. Is it 1,000 units just in the U.S.? Is it a worldwide company? Is it, talk to me about your vision for Voda as a whole.
Well, we're in an interesting business because all businesses benefit from scale, but or most businesses benefit from scale. But in the water restoration, water mitigation, restoration, fire, smoke, everything that we do, we're in a business where the larger our footprint is, the more I don't want to say easier, but the more there are opportunities in the national account realm. Insurance companies want to see not only a national footprint, but a footprint of franchise owners that have a tremendous amount of experience and capital and everything else. And so, first is attracting franchise owners that, seem like they can fulfill that down the road. And then obviously expanding our footprint. But, right now we're laser focused on, franchisee unit economics, and profitability because, as you know, it's, doesn't take much for someone to figure this out. But if franchise owners are happy, they're growing, the system will grow itself. And so, really just hyper focused on territory expansion, unit level expansion, team expansion, and not allowing anyone to rest on their laurels. I always remind myself that in the scheme of things, we're nothing. I just went to a restoration conference. We're a very small company, very, 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 very small comparative to the Belfours and the Serve Pros and everything else. And so just continuing to, as a leader, set the pace of the company and not, get to stay hungry and to stay humble, I think is key. I'd be lying to say we don't want to, be a national player and compete on the same arena as a Serve Pro or a Paul Davis, but I believe that, things take time. And so that's a huge goal. Those are amazing companies. Some of them started in the 60s. And so, instead of trying to overestimate what we can do in a year, I try to think about what we can do in a lifetime. And so I'm just trying to think out from that lens of 10 years, 20 years. I saw something interesting. I'm going to be careful with this because it's can become a little political, but I thought this was fascinating. China is a 5,000-year-old country. And if you really read up and you learn about China, like their understanding of longevity and on a long-term time horizon is fascinating. And I just saw this recent interview. I forgot who it was that represented China in saying this, but he basically said, someone said like, the U.S. makes up 15% of the, of China's GDP. And the guy said, we don't care. And he said, what do you mean? He said, it would hurt, but we don't care. China is 5,000 years old. I believe we'll live another 5,000 years. We remember a time when there wasn't even a United States. And it really put things into perspective. Obviously, I'm a patriot. I want to see things work out between the two countries. But it was just fascinating to think about, like, I've had situations where I had a customer, let's say, that was so difficult that represented a substantial amount of revenue to the business. But I've had to say it doesn't matter. If we have to cut ties, we have to cut ties. We'll weather the storm. The point of my story was I really love that long-term time horizon, and I'm actually studying that right now. Jeff Bezos had it with Amazon, has it with Amazon, and many other leaders. Sam Walton with Walmart. Great book read is Made in America. It's one of my favorite books on business. And so I think it's just teaching myself to expand the goalposts, think bigger, think further out. How do we make a bigger impact on more lives? And expanding, not compressing. Everyone's talking about compressing the time frame to success. I want to expand the time frame. I don't want to get rich quick. I want to get wealthy slow. And that's what I try to teach our franchise owners. Like, what are you going to do if you succeed this goal in 5 years instead of 2? What really changes? What if you were to go for a 5-year goal, but it's beyond what you can even imagine because you build the foundation the right way? And so I think it's just about that kind of healthy temperance of ambition, wanting to get to a goal, but also understanding that slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Let's build an oak tree. An oak tree grows for a long time before it springs up and grows 100 feet. It grows under the ground and no one sees it. And so I think it just all centers around continuing to build that machine, build in the dark, and then let the results speak for themselves. I think that's going to be where Voda goes next.
That's awesome, man. What are some things like tactically that you do to, let's say on the corporate level and on the franchisee level, but let's start with the corporate level, to inspire your team to kind of like think that way, right? Because everyone wants, like, especially when you're growing as quickly, like what are some things you do tactically to help your team build the oak tree?
Team, including franchise owners, or the corporate team, or both?
Corporate team first, franchise owners next.
Sure. Well, I think they really kind of bleed into each other anyway. But
Totally.
Well, the first thing is culture. Now everyone talks about culture. Culture is not having ping pong tables and pools and hot tubs. I actually saw the Netflix CEO. I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to relate to where I'm going. He was at their offices at Netflix, and he walked by some employees that were in a hot tub. They have a hot tub in the office. And he heard them just kind of bitching about the company. And he thought to himself, what the heck? If it's not hot tubs and perks, like, what makes people want to work at a company? And what he realized was that people want to be part of a team. They want autonomy. They want to make an impact. They want to be heard. They want their voice to be heard and actually applied when possible. And they want to, they really want to essentially affect a business's direction. And whether you have hot tubs or not, that's cool, but it's about that one thing. And so what we've really rolled out at the company, we always have done it, but more than ever. And it's something that I learned from actually Steve Schwartzman, CEO of Blackstone, in his book, is not only do we create an environment where our team is heard and we can all voice our opinions, we actually now in meetings, well, first of all, a meeting other than once a week with our whole team, a meeting should be no more people than two pies of pizza can fill. So small meetings with teams, and we try to get the junior people to speak first. Because no matter what, if the boss gives their opinion, most people are going to either consciously or unconsciously start to think that way. But if you have the junior people speak first about how they feel and what they think, and then the middle, and then the top, it creates a much more inclusive environment. And it also, those junior people who, by the way, just graduated college, they have new knowledge, they're smart, they're hungry. The only difference between you and them is time. You're not necessarily smarter than them, you just have more experience. And sometimes they have a whole different lens. And so I think it really comes down to creating an environment where everyone's opinion matters and we actually listen to it. And then on the franchise base, it's the same thing. Like, we actually in the middle of rolling out, it's a simple thing, but feedback@myvoda.com. And it's just giving us all of the feedback all the time. Doesn't mean we're necessarily going to always respond, but we're going to digest it. And we're going to work as a company to understand the actual main next problem, the one problem that we should be solving that makes the greatest impact on the franchisee's top line, profitability, lifestyle, and then tackle that one problem with full force until it's done and then move on to the next problem. When you're starting a company, you have to focus on 10 problems, 20 problems at once. But when you're bigger, it's better to focus on one problem. But instead of picking the problem based on what you think the problem is, utilize I'm sure you're doing the same thing for your FAC, figure out the main problem and then work together to solve it.
Yeah. What are some of the things that your top franchise owners do that maybe you're trying to replicate and or find in future franchise owners?
Yeah, our top franchise owners do three things really well. The first one is they're the mayor of the town. They go out there, they own the outcome. They understand that at the end of the day, the results of their business rely on them. So they own the outcome. And they go out there and they network like heck. They're out there, they're at touch a truck events and charity events and B&I and everything else. And then they're also scaling business development teams that do the same. So the business has strong business development out there. You know, it's funny, Aaron. I used to say to people, you're not doing enough business development. And I changed it to, your business is not doing enough business development. I don't care if it's you or your sales rep. The business isn't doing enough business development. It's not about you or not doing it. The business isn't doing enough. And so how do we fix that? Number two is the ability to aggressively invest in marketing. Our business is a high average ticket, and it's a difficult business, you know, in the sense that it's competitive. You need to be able to spend money to make money in this business, especially when you're starting out. So owners that focus less on their customer acquisition costs and trying to whittle that down from X to Y, instead saying, how do I scale that and do more? And understand that they have to invest in their business from a marketing perspective. And then I would say number three is, our best ideas come from franchise owners. We love that. We welcome it as an environment. But if you and I were playing a sport and our coach told you to throw me the ball and me to go right, I don't decide in the middle of the game to go left. I might tell you after the game, coach, I think I should have went left. And the next time, let's watch film and let's talk about this. But in the game, I'm going to execute on the plan that we agreed on. And so my best franchise owners, yes, they bring ideas and they bring challenges or different ways to do things. But I think that in the game, they're executing on the plan, not trying to change every single thing. So it's being a mayor of town, it's executing on the playbook, and it's investing in the marketing. Those are the three most important things.
Yeah, I completely agree. Those are the same exact things with our franchise owners as well. We have a very similar candidate profile with the B2B element. You know, you guys are kind of B2B2C with the insurance and plumbers and such like that, but it requires being out there. I know, so I'm curious, like your business model is very similar in the sense that you have the carpet and floor cleaning, which drives consistent, steady cash flow, but it's lower ticket. And then you have the higher ticket water damage, restoration, fire, mold, that kind of thing. What have you done to encourage your franchise owners to prioritize, whether it's from a time, capital, or just attention standpoint, to the consistent, steady cash flow side of your business?
Yeah. You know, 6 months ago or 8 months ago, I would say to you that was a bigger challenge. People used to ask me what our biggest challenge as a franchise was at that time. And I used to say, if this was a college, we only have underclassmen, no upperclassmen. And think back to college or high school. Sometimes you had that older friend that took you under their wing and said, hey, I did the same thing. I screwed around freshman year, and you know, I'm paying for it now as I apply to colleges. Like, I'm your peer. I know you're not listening to the teachers, but trust me, dude, I've been there. You should probably try to study a bit more. It's going to matter. You know, that older upperclassman. I think now that we have upperclassmen, in the sense that we've had franchise owners literally stop doing the cleaning because they only wanted to do restoration, which I get. It's a high average ticket. It's lucrative. A lot of those coming back and saying, you know what, I do see now why I needed to do the cleaning. And so I think the biggest thing is understanding that, again, in that collaborative community, we have great franchise owners that can influence other franchise owners. And so we try to get them talking to the other owners as much as possible. I think it's part of the development process, talking about it. I'm going to use another analogy in the movie. I think it's Air Jordan, where about Michael Jordan. You know, the agent that's trying to land Michael Jordan is a small shop comparative to the other. I forget, it was Adidas or something, and he was having trouble winning Michael Jordan's mom's opinion over. And what he did was he said, "Listen, just do me this one favor. Go to the meeting. I guarantee these three things are going to happen. And then if they do, call me back." And explaining what is going to happen ahead of time and then watching it unfold is a really great way to show people that you know what you're talking about. And so what we've done is we've explained in the development process and in the training, you're going to buy this business, you're going to be excited, you're going to go out there and do cleaning, then you're going to get a $3,900 restoration job, and then you're going to not want to clean, and then you're going to 6 months later wish you did, and just essentially communicating and over communicating exactly that. And then 2 months later, when they are doing that, we're like, hey, remember we told you you're going to feel this way? You're doing the same thing we said. And it's a lot easier to get that buy-in when someone was told they're going to go through these emotions, just like you talk about the 5 things, the stages franchise owners go through. So I think it's a lot of it's just come down to understanding how to manage expectations and how to tell stories and communicate experiences of we've been there, done that. We get why you're thinking that, but here's an alternative lens to think about. And does it solve it? No, but it's definitely cut back on, you want to build a sellable business. You need to have both levers pulling at the same time.
That's great. And that's the same. I mean, with us, we do the residential and then also the commercial. And the minute they get a huge hospital, that where they need a drone to clean, like it's just like, wait, why would I do a $300 house? But the ones that focus on residential, they are profitable faster. They have more cash. They feel more comfortable growing their business. And so we try to remind them of that. But I like bringing it up as a like, hey, here's exactly what's going to happen to you in the onboarding process, so that you can come back to it and be like, hey, remember when we said this was going to happen? I like that. I think that's good. I'll have to talk to my team about that. What are some things you've learned about yourself since launching Voda?
You got like an hour more?
You can just pick and choose the ones that you feel most comfortable talking about.
I would say first thing would be, I learned that, if I'm put in a corner or backed into a corner, I'm able to do what it takes to get out of a situation if, ethically and everything else. But, I'm a very generous and kind-hearted person. But if put in a corner, I will find a way to, not be in that position, at a level that I never knew I'm capable of. 2, I would say that I'm from the Northeast. I'm Italian. We can be a bit hot-blooded, generalizing, of course. And that drive and that passion and that, aggressive growth mentality has served me. But having the experience of watching Zach as a leader in our organization, his ability to look at things from the lens of someone else, to put yourself in their shoes, to play devil's advocate, and to essentially ask why something happened versus feeling like it's an attack on you. I've dramatically changed my perspective in the sense that almost always now I will find, the root of why something's happening and not let it emotionally affect me. That's definitely been matured through this experience. And then I would say, you want to get deep on this podcast, I would say, I'm definitely driven by, it's not money that drives me. I find very little fulfillment in that. I definitely have gone through an experience of achieving something I didn't expect to achieve. And while rewarding, realizing that I'm kind of right back to my original position of, your business is not your net worth, or your business is your net worth, not your self-worth. And so being able to, again, extract my identity from the business allows me to see it from a lens of, what's going to impact people the most. And really just understanding that if you want to build a great company, you have to really just make it so few of the things about you. And you have to make it where the business is you get to a point where the people around you are smarter at every single thing, and you're almost obsolete in a sense on the org chart. But you have to remember that you're in that position for a reason, because you have a unique skill. It's a very small percentage of people that have that visionary ability. And you have to remind yourself that you're not a salesperson, you're not an operations person, you're an entrepreneur, and there's this middle ground. And so I think for me, it's being self-aware with the concept of, hey, you're not the best at those things, and that's okay. Be humble and lean into what you are great at. I think is key. It's just, yes, you want to work on your weaknesses to a degree, but I think I learned in this experience that you're better off, especially at this stage of life, to lean into what you are good at and find people around you that are great at the other things.
That's great. And I totally agree with um, the business not being your self-worth, even if it's your net worth. Like for me, I mean, I think any business owner needs to make the business their everything at the beginning in order to get it off the ground. Because frankly, your competitors are doing that, right? Like you have to make it absolutely everything in order to get it to that next level. But once the business gets to a certain size, where your business at, where my business is at, like you try to make yourself less and less relevant, and that's how you build a valuable business. It's almost counterintuitive. Like you want to work less on it so that you hire great people so that it becomes more valuable and you become less relevant. And in doing that, you now have less responsibilities, but it doesn't mean you're worthless, or worthless as one word. So I love that, and that's something that I'm also working on. What needs to happen to get Voda to 500 units? Whether it's internal or external, what are the steps? What needs to happen?
My answer to that is endurance. It's doing the same thing day in and day out with methodical, not methodical. My goodness, what's the word? Maniacal focus. It's understanding that block out the distractions, block out I struggle with this some less so now, but a lot of people. I love to give back. Don't get me wrong. I do podcasts like this, but a lot of people want to pick my brain. My
Oh
brain's
yeah, I can't
picked.
do it. Mm-mm.
Voda picks all my brain
No
cells.
picking. No
Yeah, and
picking.
so
It's yeah, I don't have any brain left. You can't
yeah,
pick it.
yeah. I didn't have that much to start with, right? So it's like you're gonna.
Yeah, I
um,
can't do it.
Yeah, so it's understanding that every move, every conversation, every social engagement outside of work, they all are either they give you energy or they extract energy, and so it's deciding what you're going to do. They obviously have to do things that extract energy at times. Is you're a human being, but being really ruthless with that. And then I'll use the word ruthless again around the team. Um, no matter who the person is, they could be a top producer, they could be a rock star. If they're a cancer to the culture, you have to make that change. And so I think the hardest part is in order to succeed, your job as the CEO is to serve the business, right? Your job is to your fiduciary responsibility, your commitment is to that business. And so you have to make decisions for the greater good of the business. And that's one of the hardest things because the bigger the business gets, the more that those decisions, your job as the leader is to make, as you said, less decisions, you're less relevant, but you're going to have bigger decisions that make a bigger
Yeah.
impact. And, no matter which decision, which door you go through, there's going to be positive and consequences. And so deciding that I think is key. And so I would say to sum it up is laser focus on culture, people, and then not allowing external distractions to take us away from the boring little things that we have to do every day that add up to the big vision.
What are you doing in the business today, or what are some things you're doing in the business today that you don't want to be doing 12 months from now?
I would say, I mean, I do enjoy the travel. I can't travel at this level forever. It's not sustainable. So I would say finding a way to scale that down a bit.
Hmm.
And then I think that's it,
Yeah,
to be honest. Like, it's
I can
challenging
relate.
because I haven't found a way to, when I look back at any trip I've taken, almost every time there's tremendous value. Um, so I would say just finding a way to still be able to engage with the franchise community, the franchisee community, the consultant community, the restoration community, without that meaning being on a plane every single week. I would say that's probably my goal of 2026.
Yeah. So for me, I'm about to have my third kid in June, as you know. We've got two young ones at home now, and I don't think I travel as much as you, but I'm probably pretty close behind. And this is the most I've traveled this year and at the end of last year than ever. And I do the same thing. I do an audit of my trips, and I'm like, that moved the needle, that moved the needle. This outcome came as a result of that. It's hard because no one else is going to have that big of a well, I shouldn't say no one else. It's going to be hard for someone else who's not the owner of the business, who can't see all the different pieces and all the different elements, to have that much of a perspective. However, this podcast is about scaling your life, not just your business. Like, my wife does not like it when I travel. My kids do not like it when I travel. And leaving 3 kids at home with Sarah versus 2 kids at home is a very different ask. And so same thing over the next 12 months, really look at, and I'm currently on my no fly list as of the Sidekick event until the middle of July. So that, so I'm not traveling actually till the middle of July. So this is going to be the longest I haven't traveled in a long time. I'll see you at the FranServe event and at the Franchoice event in July. But other than that, so I totally agree.
Yeah. 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 It's tough. The only alternative would be, you're traveling, but then when you're home, you're really home. And I know with kids that's not even possible. So that's a big one. Um, what about for you? Is it the traveling too, or something else?
Um, yeah, so it's traveling is one piece of it. Um, that's a big one. I'd like to completely remove super large operational decisions from my plate. Um, I would like to not have the biggest issues flow up to me. And there's a time where, like, yeah, you and I are the same. Like, we don't necessarily have to get in there and have like day-to-day duties and responsibilities, but there may be a decision that consumes 2.5 weeks of my time that I have to consult others on, think about, really like look at the big picture. And ideally, I'd like to get to a point in the next 12 months where there is someone on my team capable of doing that, zooming out, looking at it, has a vision for the next 3 to 5 years, is executing ruthlessly on that vision every single day. That vision is aligned with me. I have then quarterly board meetings, and I'm able to analyze where we're at and do an assessment. That's where I'd like to get to in the next 12 months. I'm not sure, candidly, how we get there, but that is where I'd like to get to, because the operational and these large decisions and these large stressors, whatever they are, they just drain my energy. And I truly like doing stuff like this. I like being at the conferences that you and I go to and interacting with people. I like content creation. I like writing. I like creating. And I want to try to find a way in the next 12 months to spend 99% of my time doing the things that give me energy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Dan, where can people find you if they want to learn more about Voda or follow along? Yeah.
For Voda, if it's just www.myvodafranchise.com, but you'll probably learn the most just following me, which is just Daniel Klops on LinkedIn or Dan Franchise on Instagram.
That's awesome. Well, I always enjoy our conversations. It's really cool. I really value our friendship and the conversations we get to have, and I really appreciate coming on the show.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.